We begin the new parak today on Daf Kuf Lamed Amud Aleph 130a, and this is a continuation of the previous Mishnah. The previous Mishnah said that you help a animal birth, you help a woman birth, you take care of all of her needs, and then you do all needs of a bris, which is the mitzvah of bris milah on Shabbos. Now, for starters, it's important to note that that's only a bris in its proper time, a bris bismana, a bris in its proper time on the 8th day, a delayed bris, which sometimes is important to delay from health reasons, or it's delayed because of halachic reasons, whatever it may be. A delayed bris does not supersede Shabbos. It's not done on Shabbos. But the Mishnah, previous Mishnah said that you do all... Sorry?
You said delayed for health reasons or for halachic reasons. What would be the halachic reasons?
Hard time hearing.
You said delayed for health reasons or for halachic reasons. What would be the halachic reasons to delay a bris?
I'm having a real hard time hearing you.
Are you pretending not to hear me now?
No, there's like background.
Okay. I said that you said it could be delayed for halachic for health reasons or for halachic reasons. What are the halachic reasons that could delay a bris?
What are halachic reasons? So, for instance, if a baby is born bein hashmashos on Friday, so you can't do the Shabbos because maybe the baby was still born on Friday. You can't do the bris on Friday because maybe it was already Shabbos. So you can't do the bris on Friday, and you can't do it on Shabbos where it's for sure either the 8th day or the 9th. Nevertheless, you have to delay it because you can only do the bris on the 8th day on Shabbos, but if it's being delayed because of a doubt which day it is, you also couldn't do it on Shabbos. So that's the 8th day bris supersede Shabbos, and now Rabbi Eliezer is going to tell us that not only the bris, but anything else needed in order to prepare for the bris, even things that you could have done before Shabbos, will supersede Shabbos. And you could do smith work to make a knife, and you could chop down trees in order to make the fire to do your smith work to make a knife. Anything that's needed for the bris. However, Rabbi Akiva disagrees, and that's the halacha that no, you cannot just do anything. It's what cannot be done before Shabbos is allowed to be done on Shabbos. But anything else that could be done before Shabbos must be done before Shabbos and cannot be done on Shabbos itself.
Rabbi Akiva only Rabbi Akiva is even the Eved or the Chafila?
No, even the Eved. You can't do on Shabbos. You can't do anything on Shabbos that could have been done before Shabbos. It can only be done on Shabbos.
So not like the Mishnah, the first Bava in the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer.
I don't know what you're saying.
Rabbi Eliezer is not holding like that. I'm saying
in the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer says you cannot. In the Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva says that you cannot. So again, Rabbi Eliezer Omer im lehevi kli mi'erev Shabbos. If he didn't bring the knife to do the bris before Shabbos, Mevi'ah Shabbos, he can carry it through public domain even on Shabbos. Megula, and he should do it uncovered. As the Gemara is going to tell us on one point, because you want to show that you're doing a mitzvah, and another so that people not suspect you for breaking Shabbos, so you show you're doing it for the purposes of Shabbos, for a bris. Ubisakana, and at the time of danger, when it was outlawed by the Romans, etc., to do bris milah, so he would hide it, but he would have witnesses as well to show that he's not doing it to break Shabbos, he's doing it for a mitzvah. Rabbi Eliezer took it even a step further, and he said, you're allowed to chop down trees in order to make kindling, in order to make a fire, so that you could shape metal so that you can make a moil's knife, a scalpel for a bris for Shabbos, on Shabbos. You can do all that on Shabbos. Kollel Amar Rabbi Akiva, but Rabbi Akiva says no. As a general rule, that's not true. That's not true. Anything that you could not do prior to Shabbos does not supersede Shabbos. Bris Milah, the bris itself, that's what supersedes Shabbos. That will be done even on Shabbos on account of that cannot be done in advance. But making a knife, that chopping down trees to for the smith work of making the knife, of course, that would be prohibited and not supersede Shabbos. So this is a basic machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says that hechsher mitzvah, the preparation of the mitzvah, also supersedes Shabbos, and Rabbi Akiva says only that which cannot be done before Shabbos. What's the reason that you have to do it out openly when you carry the knife or a bris on Shabbos? Is it because to show the preciousness of a mitzvah that it supersedes Shabbos, or that people not suspect you of breaking Shabbos? What difference does it make what the reason is? Even in a time of where there's no danger, can you bring it without witnesses? Can you bring it covered with witnesses? Because if you say the main reason is so to show the preciousness of the mitzvah of bris milah, that you would even bring a knife on Shabbos through public domain. So don't bring it covered. Yeah, even since there's no danger. You need to bring it open to show the chiyuv of mitzvah, to show the how precious the mitzvah is. However, if you say the main reason is going to be, or the reason is because of a chashad, concern that people are going to suspect you of breaking Shabbos in general, even if it's covered, as long as you have witnesses, that's going to be enough. So what's the reason? Levi says, Rabbi Eliezer said this only on account of the chiyuv of mitzvah, to show the mitzvah is precious. Indeed, like this, Rabbi Eliezer says you need to bring it uncovered and not covered. Now, according to the version that the main reason is not to be suspected, you can bring it covered, but then you need to have witnesses. It's just he's suggesting bring it uncovered, so you don't need the witnesses. But if you bring it covered with witnesses, it works. And this Brisa says, no, you may not do that, which tells us that only in time of danger can you do it in order to get rid of at least the suspicion. But the main reason is chiyuv hamitzvah. Amar Rav Ashi Maslita Namideka. Mishnah also indicates that because it says in a time of danger you cover it and bring it with the witnesses. Besakana in a time of danger, that's true. Shaloi besakana loy. But if it's not a time of danger, you would not be allowed to bring it. Shema mina mishum chavuv mitzvah shema mina. So we see that the main thing is chibuv a mitzvah and the showing the preciousness of the mitzvah, and therefore you do it uncovered to show that the mitzvah is so precious that even on Shabbos you would bring the knife through a public domain. Tani idach, another brisa, we bring it uncovered and not covered. Rabbi Yehuda that Rabbi Yehuda says that according to Rabbi Eliezer, in the time of danger, they would bring it covered with witnesses. Now the Gemara asks, these witnesses, does it mean it has to be two people? Or does it mean there have to be people that could testify about him? A set of witnesses or witnesses that are testifying? If it's a witnesses that are testifying, then he's not included in that number. If it's just that you need two people that could testify as witnesses, then you would need, and then he himself would count as well. You'd only need one more. It's him and another. It's him and another 2 witnesses. Well, you need witnesses. If it's to him and 2, fine. How could you call it witnesses if it's him and another? No, perhaps our Mishnah means a pair of witnesses that could testify in another matter. That's what's required to bring a knife, and he would count as well. Indeed, this is left as a question. So Rabbi Eliezer said, not only did they bring the Mo's knife, but if they needed to make the knife, you'd also do everything from cutting down a tree to make the fire for the smith work, all the way to bringing the knife. So the Gemara is going to tell us that there were various places that the leader of that community, who had ruled a specific ruling that was against the majority, nevertheless, in that place, on account of it being the Asrei, the Mar, it was the place of that teacher, of that posek, so then it became the custom in that place. In the place of Rabbi Eliezer, indeed they did this. They would cut down trees to make coals, to make a fire, to do smith work on Shabbos. I don't think this is a common occurrence, so I think even Rabbi Eliezer would hold that you should try and do it before Shabbos, just that if you didn't bring it, like the first words of the Mishnah, Im lo hevi kli mi'erev Shabbos, if you didn't bring the knife before Shabbos, you can carry it on Shabbos. No, not that you should do so. And therefore, this case that in the place of Eliezer, this is what they would do. It doesn't mean every bris they cut down a tree in order to. Every bris that was on Shabbos, they'd cut down a tree to make holes in order to make a knife. But what it means is that they would not only do the bris itself on Shabbos, but even the preparatory work, the hechsher mitzvah itself, was also done on Shabbos in as much as it was needed.
If they didn't do the hechsher mitzvah before Shabbos because of oinus, would Rabbi Akiva agree that they would do anything they needed to do on Shabbos?
No. If for whatever reason they did not have a knife and bring it before Shabbos, you may not do it on Shabbos. You'd have to put on the bris.
Even if oinus.
Right? That's not something that supersedes Shabbos. Another halacha, the Gemara says that Rabbi in the place of Rabbi Yossi, they would eat chicken, they would eat bird's meat together with milk. Levi ikla be Yosef Rishba, and Levi came as a guest to the house of Yosef Rishba. Krivule Reisha the Tavta Bechalba. They brought to him a bird's head in milk. Rashi says that it's fawn. Right. Lo achal, but he wouldn't eat. Ki also the Kavi the Rebbe, when he came before Rebbe, Amalei Amayla to Shemtinu. Why didn't you put it why didn't you excommunicate him for putting chicken in milk and serving it? Amalei Asur Rabbi Yehuda Bebeseirah. That's a place of Rabbi Yehuda Bebeseirah. He's the leader of that community. Amina, and I said, Dilma Darshlik Rabbi Yisrael Glili, maybe he follows the opinion of Rabbi Yisrael Glili. The Tanan Rabbi Yisrael Glili, Rabbi Yisrael Glili says, Nema lo teichlu kol nevela. It says, you may not eat any nevela, which is an animal that died in a manner that wasn't proper shechita. In the end of that verse itself, it says, and don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. That which is prohibited as nevela should be prohibited as basa b'chalav, milk and meat, because it's in the same verse. And therefore, I would think that even even birds which have nevela are going to be aser. So perhaps it should be prohibited as basa b'chalav. That's why it says in its mother's milk. So that excludes a bird that doesn't have a mother's milk. Now the truth is that the Chachamim agree to this. That when the Torah prohibited a calf in its mother's milk, it meant animal milk, which animal flesh with milk, and that would be any behema, any a large animal, small animal, a chaya, so that would be venison, but it would exclude birds. And the reason we prohibit milk and chicken is on account of a d'Rabbanan. It's not a d'oraisa prohibition, it's a d'Rabbanan because people call it meat, and so it'll be confused. So Rabbi Yossi really is just saying that there is no rabbinic prohibition there, as opposed to the drash itself. The drash itself, everybody would agree to that there is no Torah prohibition for chicken and milk. On Rabbi Yitzchak, Ir Achas Hoysa B'Eretz Yisrael, there was a certain city in Eretz Yisrael, Shahaya Oisim Rabbi Eliezer, that followed the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, and not only the mitzvah of bris itself, but even the hechsher mitzvah, even the preparation for mitzvah, preparatory acts to get not only the bris done, but to bring the knife and to make the knife and fix the knife and whatever else would be needed in grinding medicinal potions, all would be permissible on Shabbos, and they would do that. And as a result, the entire city had long longevity. They didn't. None of them died early. Not only that, once the government prohibited bris milah, and prohibited for the entirety of Am Yisrael to do bris. Besides for that city was excluded, showing that because they did the mitzvah with such devotion and such joy, they were spared of this decree. Nevertheless, the halacha is not that way. The halacha is that you can only do the bris on Shabbos. You cannot do the preparatory acts. Hechsher mitzvah is not derech Shabbos, and this is not true. This is not only true for bris. This is true for carbon. This is true for other mitzvahs that supersede Shabbos. And there are just a few. What you can do before Shabbos does not supersede. Tanya Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Leimer kol mitzvah shekibel aleim b'simcha k'goyin mila. All mitzvahs that Klal Yisrael accepted upon themselves with joy, like bris milah, as it says, that I am glad, I have deep joy on account of your statements of the mitzvahs you've given me, like somebody who finds a great treasure. So that mitzvah remains something done with great gladness. But mitzvahs that Bnei Yisrael accepted upon themselves with a struggle, like the prohibition of erva, of the prohibition of sexual relations with relatives. It says, as it says, and Moshe heard Bnei Yisrael crying to their families. And what is that? Why does it say to their families? It should say that they hear them crying. What's that word? They were crying about the matters of sexual prohibitions. That's their families. So therefore, that mitzvah also is always a struggle. The lekek ksuba, the lerma by tigra, because every time there is a marriage, and you have to write the ksuba, you have to write the agreements of dowries and ksuba and commitments to what you're paying for the wedding, etc. There's always a struggle. It's never easy and smooth and as glad as it should be. Tanya Rishimon Elazar Eimer Kol Mitzvah Shemas Yisrael Atzman Aleim Lamisa B'Shas Gzeres HaMalchus Kegoyim Avetz Kechavim Amila. All mitzvahs that Bnei Yisrael gave themselves over to, and were willing to die for, even when the government forbade it, such as avodah zarah, idolatry, and mila and bris mila. It is still strong in their hand. It's a fascinating thing that of all the mitzvahs that are most common to do, it's well over 90% of Jews give their children a bris milah, even though that it's more than Yom Kippur and Pesach and the Seders and so on. It's the most practiced of practices of mitzvahs that Bnei Yisrael do. But other mitzvahs that Bnei Yisrael did not really dedicate themselves in such a way where they were willing to die for it. When the government made a decree against it, and what would that be? Going to tefillin, like tefillin. It's still weak in the hands of Bnei Yisrael that they're not constantly careful with tefillin. Now Rabbi Yana said tefillin guf naki. Tefillin requires a clean body. Kalisha bal kanafayim, like Elisha, the master of the wings. Mahi, what does it mean, a clean body? To not pass gas in it. Rava says not to fall asleep in them. Elisha ben bal kanafayim. And what, on account of what was he called Elisha, master of the wings? Once the Roman evil empire made a decree on the Yisrael anybody that puts on tefillin and is caught with tefillin on his head, they will drill into his head. They will break his head. But Elisha was defiant. He put on tefillin and walked into the marketplace that way. And one of these Roman soldiers saw him. So Elisha ran away. And the soldier chased him. When he came close to him, he took the tefillin off of his head. He was holding it in his hand. He said to him, "What's in your hand?" He said that I have wings of doves. Dove wings. He opened his hand, and indeed there was a dove wing. Pretty cool trick. The miracle happened to him on account of his devotion to that mitzvah. Therefore, he was called Master of the Wings. Now Gemara says, so why was it that he said wings of doves? Why did he say something else? Because Bnei Yisrael are compared to a dove in Shir Hashir. Shenemah says, wings of doves, nechba bekesef, covered in silver, and in fine yellow gold, her limbs. Just as a dove, the wings are what protect her. It allows her to fly away and soar above. So too, the Torah mitzvahs allows us to soar above all of the trials and tribulations and suffering from others, from the nations. Rashi says another interpretation: the wings, a dove fights back with its wings. After so, mitzvahs maginas aleim. So too, Bnei Yisrael, the mitzvahs are their protection. Amar Rabbi Abba Barav Ada, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Pamach Hashachav Levi Zem Erev Shabbos. One time it occurred that a baby's bris was on Shabbos, but the moel had forgotten to bring the izemel, the moel's knife, prior to Shabbos. So they brought it through rabbinic public domains, going from one roof to another roof, from courtyard to courtyard and not through the public domain. Now we turn to Kuflamin of base 130b. Shalom b'rasa Rabbi Eliezer, and not not with the agreement of Rabbi Eliezer. Maskefla Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef said, "What do you mean not in the not with the agreement of Rabbi Eliezer? Quite the contrary. Rabbi Eliezer is the one that says he allowed to bring it even in a public domain. For sure, he allows to bring it in a rabbinic public domain on roofs and courtyards." Shalom Ratzon Rabbi Eliezer, Adarabba Rabbi Eliezer the Shari. V'chitema Shalom Ratzon Rabbi Eliezer the Shari, Afilu b'Shus HaRabban. And if you would tell me, no, it wasn't with the agreement of Rabbi Eliezer, who says you should really bring it through public domain. Well, and what it means to say is rather this was in accordance with the opinion of the Chachamim, who say that you're only allowed to bring it through a rabbinic public domain, a Carmelis, which is on roofs and courtyards and carfes. Mishari, and is that really permissible? Do the Rabbanan allow to carry a knife through a rabbinic domain in order to do a bris? No, that's something you could do on Shabbos. Even rabbinic prohibitions are not allowed for that reason. Just as you're not allowed to bring the knife that you could have brought before Shabbos and didn't, you can't bring it through a public domain, a Torah public domain. Therefore, similarly, you're not allowed to bring it on rooftops. You can't bring it through storage areas and not through courtyards that had not had an eruv there, a joint meal. You can't do that, even though those are rabbinic prohibitions, because on a D'oraisa level, those are not public domains. And for a mitzvah, you'd think you're allowed to carry it. No, since you could have done it before Shabbos, and this is a hechsher mitzvah. It's not the mitzvah itself, but preparation to make the mitzvah available. Therefore, you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos. Amar Ravashi Shalom B'Tzon Rabbi Eliezer Machlokasei El B'Tzon Rabbi Shimon. So what it means, it's not in accordance with Rabbi Eliezer, who says you should have carried it straight through a public domain, and not according to the Chachamim who disagree with him and say that you should not bring it at all because you're not allowed to. Ella B'Tzon Rabbi Shimon, rather in concordance with Rabbi Shimon. Tanan Rabbi Shimon I mean echa gagas ve'echa kafifas ve'echa chetzeres kunim rishus achasem l'ken shashavs b'seichel. Now, we talked about this before. We'll just go through it quickly. On Shabbos, if you have a private domain, your own space, so your house, you can carry within there, no problem. If you have a courtyard, which is enclosed, but there are multiple houses that connect to that courtyard. So let's say there are 4 houses in the courtyard. Even though the courtyard is completely enclosed, if you didn't make an eruv, a joint meal, which is called a ruve chatzeros, the joint meal of a courtyard, you may not carry from the house into the courtyard or vice versa. But you may carry within the courtyard itself and within the house itself, just not transfer from one to the other. But you can carry in the courtyard itself. Then you have the street in front of it, the mavoi. That mavoi also has multiple chatzeros, so the alleyway has multiple courtyards open to it. That too needs a shitufei mavoyis. It needs a joint meal for all of the courtyards in that alleyway, and then you can carry there, even though it is enclosed on 3 sides and has a marking at the beginning. You're not allowed to carry unless it has a joint meal. Then you have carfaves, which are storage areas that are not made for living, but rather that's where people would store their firewood or stuff like that. So that's its own. It's not mukaf ladira. It's not encircled for or walled in for typical living, but rather for these specialty items. That would also be prohibited to carry, and that has its own rule. So the question here is, what this that you're allowed to carry in your courtyard, does it include the other rabbinic really they're reshus hayachids, they're private domains because they're completely enclosed, yet you can't carry there because they have their own designation. And so therefore you can't carry from the house into there. How about from the courtyard onto the roof? From the roof into the karfeif, into the storage area? Are those separate designations and you cannot carry from one to the other? So here Rabbi Shimon says they're all one designation and you can carry from one to the other. The Tanam we learned Rabbi Shimon echad gagers vechad kafifas vechad chatzeros kulan rishus achasin lekelim sheshavsa b'sechem. So a vessel that was in my house, I may not move into the courtyard, but a vessel that was in the courtyard at the onset of Shabbos, I can carry it not only within that courtyard, but even onto the rooftop and even into the carpet. But not for vessels that were in the house. So Rav Zera asked Rav Asi, and mavui, your alleyway, that the courtyards themselves did not make a shitufei mavais. It did not make a partnership, meaning a joint meal, for all the courtyards. Can I carry within the alleyway? I understand I can't move from the just like I can't move from the carry something out from the house to the courtyard if there was no eruv. I wouldn't be able to take it from the courtyard into the alleyway without an eruv, or shitufei mavais. It's called. We'll call it the eruv. So without the eruv meal, I can't carry from the house in the courtyard, and without the eruv meal, I can't carry from the courtyard into the alleyway. But what about in the alleyway itself? In the courtyard itself, I'm allowed to carry. In the alleyway itself, am I also allowed to carry? Me Amrina Kachatza would say, look, it's the same as the courtyard. And a courtyard, even though there was no eruv meal made, nevertheless, I'm allowed to carry throughout the entire courtyard anything that was in the courtyard at the onset of Shabbos. That's its place, and I can carry it throughout the courtyard, even if it's large. So to the alleyway, even though there's been no partnership, no joint meal, eruv meal, you're allowed to carry from one end to the other. Or perhaps, or we can make some distinctions from a courtyard. One distinction. The chutzner is leidalad mechitzas. High less leidalad mechitzas. A courtyard has a full four-wall enclosure. It's a completely enclosed space. True, there's a door or a doorway. That's going to be fine. It is completely enclosed. Whereas your mavui, your alleyway, the opening of the alleyway is not closed. It has 2-3 walls, depending if it's a mavui mefulash or not, whether it goes through and through, or it has a block at the one end. But either way, it's got either 2 or 3 walls, but not 4, and it needs a demarcation. A demarcation at the end where there's an opening, which we know is either a lechi or a kora, either a vertical or horizontal beam at the end, at the opening, but it's not a full enclosure. So that's one distinction. So maybe you're not allowed to carry throughout the entire alleyway. A courtyard, it's typical livable space. And we've seen this before. Much of what was done in a household was done in the courtyard. They didn't have space in the household for things other than sleeping and eating. But the kitchen, meaning the oven, was out in the courtyard, and the washing was out in the courtyard, laundry, weaving, many of the things that were done that would be done in a typical home were done in the courtyard. So courtyards were living space. It was a living room, a shared joint living room, but it was nevertheless livable space, whereas the alleyway is not a livable space. So Shasik v'le'amal midi. So even though Rabbi Zera asked Rav Asi this question, he did not respond in any way. Yet at some point he heard him teaching, found him teaching, and he was teaching this. He said it in the name of Rish Lakish, said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the compiler of the Mishnah. He brought this scenario that happened that once they forgot to bring the moil's knife on Shabbos, Veviyu b'Shabbos, so they brought it on Shabbos. And the Chachamim were, it was a difficult thing for them. They was upset. That they would abandon or ignore the teaching of the Chachamim, the majority, that says you're not allowed to bring the knife because that's a hechsher mitzvah. That's not the mitzvah itself, but a prep work for the mitzvah, and therefore cannot be done on Shabbos. It doesn't supersede Shabbos. And they will follow the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Why was it a problem that we're following Rabbi Eliezer? Chada de Rabbi Eliezer shamusi. One, because Rabbi Eliezer shamusi. What does that word mean? So Rashi says shamusi because he was in excommunication, and we've seen the story with the oven, the achnai oven, that Rabbi Eliezer said everything that was done in that oven was tahor, and the Chachamim disagreed, and they had a great argument. And even though the halacha is that you follow the majority, Rabbi Eliezer went ahead and ruled based on his minority opinion, and the Chachamim excommunicated him on account of that. And therefore, we can't follow the halacha of Rabbi Eliezer, as great as Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol is, the great Rabbi Eliezer, and nevertheless, on account of his excommunication, we don't follow it. That's the way Rashi says. Rashi brings from the Yerushalmi that Shamusi means that he was from the academy of Shammai. And therefore, even though Rabbi Eliezer was great, the great Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol, we paskin like the Chachamim and not the majority, and not Beis Shammai. Besides, Yachid v'Rabim, Halachik Rabim. Besides, it's against the classic rule of following the majority. Yachid v'Rabim, if you have an individual and you have a majority, Halachik Rabim, the halacha is like the majority, and Rabbi Eliezer is a single opinion that says that not only the mitzvah itself, but even that's the prep work needed for the mitzvah, like bringing the knife, would supersede Shabbos. And therefore, the Chachamim were upset. This was something that was difficult, that they followed the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Shaya says Rabbi Yehuda HaGezer. Rabbi Shaya said, I asked Rabbi Yehuda the moil, says actually it was a courtyard. It was an alleyway that had not made the joint meal, but it was a courtyard that had the enclosures. It just didn't have the joint meal. And they brought it from the baby was at one end of the courtyard of the alleyway, and the moil's knife was at the other end of the alleyway, and they brought it from one end of the street to the other. So we see that an alleyway is different than a courtyard. That even though a courtyard, anything that was in the courtyard can be carried from one end to the other, the alleyway is not the same, and you would not be allowed to bring from one end to the other if they did not make the eruv meal, the joint meal. So he said, so you hold that it's permissible, and therefore they were not following Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, they were following the Chachamim. The reason they brought this moil's knife was not because they followed Rabbi Eliezer and they were breaking Shabbos. In fact, that it's permissible to be brought, because even though an eruv had not been made, you're allowed to carry from one end to the other, and that's what you're saying, why it wasn't following Rabbi Eliezer, which means that you're of the opinion that just like a courtyard, you're allowed to carry from one end to the other, even if no eruv meal has been made, but you just can't carry from the house into the courtyard or vice versa. The same as for your alleyway. Hamalayin, so he said to him, yep, indeed, that's my opinion, and that's what I'm explaining, that the reason they followed, the reason they brought the moil knife was because it was in the alleyway already, and you're allowed to carry from one end to the other, even though there no eruv had been made, no eruv meal had been made. But at times I asked you this question, you didn't answer me. Dilma agav shitrach riatlach gamrich, on account of when you were reviewing this, you came to hear the teaching of Rish Lakish. and you learned about this. On account of my going through and reviewing it, I was able to learn this. And so, indeed, at the time, I did not realize that's halacha. And now, in reviewing it and learning from Rish Lakish and hearing this price of Rabbi Yeshaya and hearing the teaching, I was able to see that this is indeed a permissible thing. So again, we have from the house to the courtyard, you're not allowed to carry unless there was an Eruv meal. But within the courtyard, even without an Eruv meal made, you're allowed to carry. And the same is in the alleyway, even though that it does not have a complete four walls, and even though it's not really a livable space, anything that's in the alleyway, even if the joint meal had not been made, you can carry from one end of the alleyway to the other, and it'll be permissible. That's what Rabbi Shai said. And that's what happened on that day. The moil's knife was in the alleyway. It was just one end of the alleyway, and they carried it to the other end of the alleyway, even though no joint meal had been made. And at first they thought, look, they were carrying in a mavoy, in an alleyway that doesn't have an eruv, or shituf, doesn't have the joint meal. And to which Rabbi Yeshaya explained, no, actually it was a permissible way, and they were not following Rabbi Eliezer, they were following the Chacham. Itmer, Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rav, Mavashal in a shtatvaboy, Eimataltabay Ella Dalarabas. Rav said, an alleyway that didn't have shitufei mavais, it does not have the partnership, meaning the joint meal, you're not allowed to carry from one end to the other. You're only allowed to carry up to 4 amos, which is approximately 6 feet. This statement of Rabbi Zera in the name of Rab was stated, but not explained. Now, the Asa Rabbi Baravua Pirsha, until Rabbi Baravua came and explained it. The Amar Nachman on Rabbi Baravua Amarav in the name of Rab. The households did not make an eruv with their courtyard. So again, you have the house, you have the courtyard, and the multiple houses in the courtyard have to make an eruv in the courtyard. So even if if the courtyard itself did not make an eruv, they can't make an eruv with the street, with the alleyway. So mavishal and shtatr by eruv chetzeres imbatim. Since the houses cannot carry into the courtyard because they didn't make a joint meal, you can only carry 4 amos in the alleyway. The households did not make a joint meal with the courtyard, with the household, the various households in the courtyard. In the courtyard itself, you can carry 4 amos. So it says, what difference does it make if the courtyards made a joint meal with the houses? Because what we say is that the courtyards themselves become like the house because you have your joint meal in the courtyard. So it's like your dining room. And this will continue tomorrow with the teaching of Rav, that the alleyway itself is it's not enough to just have a vertical beam, which is the lechi, or a horizontal beam in front, which is the korah. It's not enough to have just the demarcation at the opening place of the mavoi. You also need that the households make an eruv with the courtyards, and the courtyards be open to that alleyway in order to allow for that to be a joint space that you're allowed to carry from one end to the other. And we'll continue with that tomorrow.